Can you hear me, Ron?
City ordinance.
All right.
We're all good.
Yeah, we got about 16 of them.
So the new guy that.
The real question. This is in yesterday morning.
Turn
off. Correct. A line I've never seen on the new chair that they opened. The other part of it is opened in the years, like on the triple on the south.
Okay, very good. Welcome, everybody. It is January 8th, 2024, our first meeting of the new year. Hope everybody had a great new year. And we will go ahead and get started. I'll let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present. Commissioner Jordan is on Zoom. And our executive management team is here or on Zoom. And so we will go ahead and get started with Kyle. You're first on the list.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year, commissioners, and good morning. We are very excited to start off the year and the first strategic planning session. We actually have 2 very important public works topics to kick off the year with you all. They're both going to kind of set the direction for a couple of big initiatives here in public works for us moving forward throughout the rest of 2024. So we wanted to be first on your calendar to start the year off. The big one to start us off here is going to be the operations of our solid waste transfer stations. As you know, we have a few, we've been talking about this a little bit throughout 2023. We went out for proposal. We also commissioned a study about the operations and maintenance of our transfer stations here. So We've got our dream team here. Deb and Lindsay are gonna walk us through a lot of the details with regards to the analysis that we've gone through, and put a bunch of information in front of you so that either today or in the near term, you guys can point us in the direction you'd like us to take.
Okay.
All right.
Alright, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you. Here we are again. What I'd like to do is just give you a brief history of the solid system in Spokane County, real quick, just so everyone's up to speed on this. In the late 80s, the county and the city entered into a local agreement to develop the regional system as a means to kind of manage our solid waste, plan for our solid waste. At that time, we just had some landfills that were getting ready to be closed and we needed new disposal facilities. So the city and county entered into an agreement. The city put out bonds for either the construction of a new landfill or the waste to energy facility, which became the waste to energy facility, as well as constructing some transfer stations. And the city also at that time took over the regional system and did the administration and management of it. The county really didn't have a solid waste department. So those bonds and the agreement went for 20 years. And in 2014, the agreement was expiring. And the city and county agreed at that time that the county would then take over the administration and management of the regional system, as well as 2 of the transfer stations. The city would keep and own and operate the waste to energy facility, and we created the system within that. In 2014, 2 of our local members left the regional system because previously it was all of the unincorporated county and all of the incorporated cities were in agreement to be in the system. And in that time, when the county took over, Spokane Valley and City of Liberty Lake had left the system. So they are not part of this Spokane regional system at this time. Give you a little idea of currently our transfer stations, by the way, are run through a contract with Waste Connections, and that expires in November of this year. Just a real brief on the regional system material flow. Garbage is either collected at curbside or people self-haul it to our facilities. 3 facilities are the waste to energy facility, the North County Transfer Station, and the Valley Transfer Station, and the 2 transfer stations are owned by the county. So the garbage is collected, taken there. We have recyclables that either go to Smart Center or to local markets, and organics goes to Bartec. They're the only facility in the area that takes that. The garbage, municipal solid waste, is either burned at the incinerator or when the incinerator is at capacity, or there's maintenance or some type of repair going on. We take the remainder to a landfill. And currently, I have Adams County landfill down there. That should be up and operational sometime this quarter of this year. Currently, Waste Management has the contract. We're going to Wenatchee landfill until Adams County is ready. The 3 remaining landfills that you see on that waste flow, Finley Butte, that is where the waste energy takes their ash. Northside landfill is a city-owned and operated landfill, partially closed, partially open, for emergency capacity only. And then Graham Road landfill is an inert waste or a limited purpose landfill. There we take debris that you cannot burn, non-putrescible. So that's the system in a nutshell. We can go to the next slide. So our current contract is up November of this year. We've been working hard the last 2 years, believe it or not, to try and figure out what our service needs are when this contract expires, and with a goal in mind that we will save the community, well, not save them, but give them the most cost-effective, best services and most efficient services that we can find. So that's our goal in mind. And so our service needs are the operations and maintenance of our facilities, which includes processing municipal solid waste, organics, and also recycling and household hazardous waste drop-off that's free for our residents. The The other two components of those service needs are we need transport of our garbage from our facilities to a disposal site and then disposal. And so those are the service needs, that's how we evaluated our costs. And what we did was we wound up with two scenarios that we looked into, which is one is private contracted as we are doing now, or an actual county in-house operations with county staff. All right, next slide. Okay, so how we did that, we went out first, we had a rate model from FCS Group that we use. It's pretty in-depth, pretty extensive model. We also developed with HDR a cost analysis tool where we could look at what it would cost not only a private company to come in, and so we would know what reasonable costs were when we did go out for bid, but we can also plug in costs that from a county run perspective. So we can use that analysis tool in many ways. And then the other methods, tools we use, we went out for, in April of 2023, we released a RFP for operations, maintenance, transport, disposal at our stations. We got back two bids, one from Waste Connections, one from Waste Management, and then we entered into negotiations with Waste Management in October. And the other thing I have up there is salary ranges. When we looked at the county scenario, we wanted to make sure we were basically kind of on the same page as a private industry. So we developed a range of salaries for positions that we're looking at, and then we took the high end of those salaries just so that we could have some conservative values. So you see the apples to apples there. On these scenarios, what we did was we basically tried to compare the exact same thing and the costs in these two scenarios. Same staffing levels, same equipment purchases, same services hours, same tonnage, same inflation, all of the things on the same. And you'll see household hazardous waste is scratched out there because we discovered even with the RFP and bidding with a private contractor, the county would probably contract that out separately anyway. Any questions so far? Okay, all right, next slide please, Ron. Thank you. Just real quick, talked about staffing. This is just a sort of real quick little number to show you total staff we're looking at, same as we got in the bid from Waste Management, was about 25 employees for 2 facilities. And then next slide is the equipment. So these were our equipment needs. And we're using the same amount of equipment that we got from the bid proposals.
So question back on the staffing, does that include, because we've done it internally, the cashiers at the transfer stations, does that include that here?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, it's not actually figured into the bid proposal, so we kept it out of our scenario. Since we're already paying for the cashiers, it's not part of the operations. And I'll show you as we go along, but.
Okay, but then as we look at the whole picture, it's part of it.
Yeah, once we're looking at rate analysis, when we get towards the rate analysis piece, it'll all be included.
And Commissioner, just add on for clarity for everybody, what this is really trying to compare is everything that we currently and might contract out and all those additions. There's still basically our entire in-house solid waste team is kind of removed from this analysis because we're completely trying to say, what are we buying versus what if we replaced everything in-house of what we're buying. So Deb's entire team, our landfill closure team, the cashiers are removed from this analysis because we are going to do that regardless.
Yep, next slide, Ron. Thank you. Just so everyone understands, there's a lot of different ways to look at this data, and we kind of, every way we went in the last 2 years was kind of down a little rabbit hole. But really the ultimate thing to know is no matter which rabbit hole we went down, we came up with the same general theme, which was there was a significant enough cost difference between the two scenarios that I'm here in front of you today. Assumptions though that did stay the same on each of our little journeys down the rabbit hole. especially with the scenarios you see today, are that we made sure inflation's progressively decreasing over the next 10-year term because it's so high right now. But we made sure that was the same in each scenario. We did a conservative amount of tonnage increase, only 1% annually, just to, again, be on the conservative side, because as you know, every time we increase tonnage, we're actually paying less per ton to process it. So, and then one of the important things that you'll see when we get to the rates that we'll show it towards the end of the presentation, we use a target fund balance sort of as our kind of rule of thumb on creating these scenarios. So our target fund balance, our minimum target fund is 90 days of operating cash. And so that's what we tried to model into in each scenario. With the county scenario, we developed a range of costs using for everything we did, and then we tried to use the top end of those ranges of costs. Not that we would necessarily run that way, but so we could show a conservative difference in the cost. And with the contractor scenario, we used their bid proposals because they're pretty much solid. They're set. They're not going to change those. Okay, what do we break this down into per ton costs? And one thing I want to make sure I emphasize on this is that these costs are only for operations and maintenance of the facilities, the transport and disposal. As Kyle mentioned previously, it doesn't include any of the other things that we are doing right now. It doesn't include our skill house, doesn't include our indirect costs, doesn't include closed landfill, our capital. You know, all of those things are out of this scenario, and this is strictly the O&M transport and disposal. And so for 2024, our existing contract as it stands today, you'll see we have a fixed processing cost per ton on each of these, our transport and disposal costs. So a total cost per ton this year is $101 for operating our facilities. When we looked at our scenarios, if you see on 2025 with the contractor, it's $125.85 per ton. With a county run scenario, it's $109.60. So we had a difference of about $15.
So saying it doesn't include the capital equipment, because we kind of glossed over the equipment slide. So is that in this number or on a replacement basis? I mean, how are you handling the equipment, because that slide had a lot of equipment?
Yeah,
There wasn't
it's
a
not
dollar
the
amount.
purchase of it, but it is the maintaining of it. But any kind of like capital expense where we're buying equipment or fixed structures or any of that kind of thing, or upgrades to the facility are not included in this, but maintaining it is.
Because that would be one of the big costs.
Yeah, and we have another
You'll
slide
get there?
coming up that'll
Okay.
show you. You're way ahead of me already.
Sorry.
No, you're seeing the next slide.
So this is for garbage, and if you go to the next slide, this is our cost per ton for organics, and again, O&M and transport disposal only. One thing I want to make sure you understand is that organics, the actual cost of organics is higher than what we charge at our facilities, and this is intentionally incentivizing diverting organics as a waste diversion for reducing waste. And so we've been doing this since when the city started doing organics. So it's subsidized by our solid waste costs, as well as we use some of our LaSWIFA or our state funding to process organics as well. But you'll see this year, the $82 a ton per cost. In 2025 with the contractor, it's about 125 versus county runs at 115. Next slide. And this is just sort of a little visual to show you in 5-year increments, looking at just the operations and transport disposal costs over the years. Contractors in the dark brown, county run facility is in the orange, and you can kind of see the difference. Just a little visual for you. Okay, next slide. Okay, how does this look in the long term? Cost analysis over a 10-year period, you'll see the first two lines are highlighted, keep an eye on those. But basically the bottom line is that, the county-run facility over the 10 years is about 89 million, where the contractor is about 212. The orange lines that you see are where you see the cost difference. The remainder of that in these scenarios stays the same. We're assuming the same cost for landfill transport and disposal, because if we don't go with a private, we'll go with the city's contract, same cost. Clean Green, we did not figure in different costs than what the contractor bid us, but I have a little asterisk by it because we believe at a minimum, because we have not negotiated a contract straight with Bartek, we could save about at least 10%, if not a little more, because we could do some different efficiencies in our operations to make it less expensive. So, next slide. So what this looks like, cost difference over the 10-year period, is the first line there, is about $23 million that we would have a cost savings with the county run scenario. And then this is where we added in the extra costs, Commissioner Cuny, that you were asking about. We figured in about $3.5 million to buy rolling stock, which is all the rolling stock equipment, all the containers that we need, at a 10-year loan at 7%. And so that's figured in here. We also figured in the interest that we earned on the funds that we held in our account. And so our 23 million goes to about 19. That is the cost difference over the 10-year period. And since we've discovered that we probably would save some more money on equipment loan, because since we are part of Public Works, there are some savings that are afforded to us that we didn't realize when we were doing the scenarios.
And what are those?
We've been doing a lot of research on this because we have needs, both, as we were talking about, a loan for the Public Works Operations Building, and then looking at this lending scenario. But it allows for one Public Works fund to borrow from another, so long as they pay back the loan with the same interest rate as the skip. So in theory, if the board was amenable, we have enough fund balance in our wastewater reserves that solid waste could borrow from wastewater and pay it back at a lower interest rate than what is commercially available right now, so long as it matched the skip.
Yeah, we did a lot of this when I was with the city, working on it. In that case, it was solid waste that had the Bank of Hines, kind of, good old days, right, Amber? Yeah,
That was pre my time, but I always heard about this mysterious bank.
yeah, so, but it's a very effective way to reduce cost.
And keep that interest in-house.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
And we're looking at this, in this estimation, brand new equipment. And where there's possibilities to actually use the rolling stock that's there now. When Waste Connections leaves, there are tools in the contract that afford us to be able to make agreements with that equipment. So there are possibly other savings as well. Okay, Ron? Thank you. Okay, so how does that look in rates? What I wanted first to show you, because this gets a little complicated, but is that these were the targets we were looking at. Remember I talked about our 90 days operating cash, our minimum target fund. So these are the two scenarios. The red is a contractor run scenario. The orange is a county run scenario. These are where we wanted our fund balances to be each year in order to be at 90 days operating cash for operations. So these are the two things we use to develop our rates. If you go to the next slide, you'll see what we basically did was we created scenarios with different rates for the contractor versus county to keep our funds above that minimum or as close to that minimum balance that we can. Each of these have different fund balances, so they're not exactly the same. because the target fund balance is different. And so over a 10-year term, what you're looking at is for the contractor run, a 41% cumulative rate increase over the 10 years. But the county run scenario, it's 28% cumulative. And kind of the key is the first 3 years. If you look at the very first year, we have a 16.5% rate increase that we need to get from the contractor to stay above the fund balance, and a 5% from the county. I've tried so many different scenarios, I can't tell you, with the rates. And when you tried to get it down closer to the actual fund balance, the red and the orange line, we're behind the rest of the 10 years, we were playing catch up. So the first year was really crucial to keep that fund balance there in the middle of the term above fund balance. Are there any questions on this? Next slide. Thank you. So how does this look in actual rates? I gave you the current rates in the very first two lines. This year we are at $125.40 per ton for municipal solid waste and $60.50 for organics. The first year of a county run scenario, our garbage is about at $131.67 in this scenario, where the contractor starts at $146.09. So there, the rate per ton for garbage is about $15 more for the contractor run scenario. By the time we got to 2035, with the county being at 165, the contractor was at 184. And then you can see with organics, it was kind of the same trend. Any questions on that? Okay, I think I just have one last slide for you. Yes.
When you talk about organics, does that include compost? So, you know, food waste and all that kind of stuff?
Food waste, yard waste.
Okay, all right.
Anything that can be composted.
Okay.
This last slide is just sort of kind of to show you if we ran using a private contractor, but we used the rate increases that we would use in the county run scenario, that 28% cumulative. The green is our ending fund, and you can see zero is actually, we're in the negative by the time we hit 2035. So it's just sort of was a, oh wow, kind of realization. Okay, and then last two slides, just advantages, because you know, regardless of which way we go, there are advantages for each scenario. With the contractor, we have less staff management, really. We're basically managing the contract and not the people. We have still the risk and liability, but it's limited. We do not have to manage the rolling stock. And then the last one, this is the best word,
Could you back up, Ron?
yeah, one word, thank you. The disengagement of contractual versus self-operation. Basically what this is saying, I couldn't think of a good way to say it, so, is that if we are in a contract and we're not having success, that there are some issues with operating, we have leverage in that contract to make adjustments. Self-operation, you still have some ways to make adjustments, but you don't have the leverage that you have in the contract to get things done that you need to get done. Okay, thanks. Self-operated advantages, I know the list is longer, but we can keep our rate increases lower and our tip fees lower for the customers with the self-operated. We have more control and flexibility over those rates as well as our services. Anytime anything changes, we don't have to go and negotiate costs, we can get it done. Improved services, I think we would have some value-added customer service pieces here. We'd be harmonized, it'd be a direct line to our staff. We would be able to make changes and also create our own customer service program. Improved facility maintenance is a big one. You know, it's nothing against a contractor. They are working to create a profit. And so when they cut corners, it's typically on facility maintenance. There's a lot of maintenance that can be deferred. County run the facility maintenance would be an integral part and our facilities would last longer. We'd also have public works opportunities to share equipment, as Kyle had discussed, and as well as mechanics. That would be a big bonus. One of the things I know that you're all interested in is the legislative climate, and I'm sure you've seen all of the solid waste related bills coming through again this session. The WACSWM group, the County Solid Waste Managers under WASAC, have worked really hard to be engaged in this legislation so that funding is available anytime a mandate comes down. With the legislative climate, county run would be a much easier scenario to make adjustments as we're getting these new bills in, especially for EPR, and the chance to get that funding would be much more beneficial with the self-operated. Reporting, documentation, communication, it's all just a direct line. We wouldn't have to go through the walls of all the things a business does. And then, with the savings, potential savings, we would be able to build our capital fund. It wouldn't be going to a profit. We would also be able to look at possibly starting an emergency debris fund. There's some ideas for this. We have safety upgrades to do to our facilities, plus other capital upgrades. And I believe that is the end of my presentation. You don't need that one, you know.
One of the things I wanted to highlight on this, just kind of in general, first off, Deb and Lindsay have been deep diving into these numbers for a very long time. They play with rate models constantly, and first, a huge kudos to the work that they've done to put us in a position here to present this data for you. It's not easy. There's so many factors, and they've really gone inside and out, and I've challenged them 100 times to do it differently, and they continue to do so, and we keep coming back to this same place. Neither of them nor myself are actually excited about these numbers because none of us really want. This is a lot of work if we go to this self-operation. We have now basically to shore up a whole, the solid waste division is going to triple in size if we go this route, and that's a big challenge for everybody. But we obviously have a responsibility to put this in front of you all to send us in a guiding direction. And at the end of the day, this isn't a highly desirable line of business. The waste haulers want to haul waste and dispose of it. That is their job. I know just anecdotally for Waste Management, they had to lobby corporate just to get the ability to propose on this because they're not really interested in running a transfer station. They haul and dispose. It's their bread and butter. They do operate some transfer stations, but it's not what they are trying to do. And when you look at those deltas at the numbers at the end of the day, it's pretty much the difference between a reasonable profit margin that they would want, an 8 to 9, 10% profit margin to do this work, and whether that profit margin, whether we pay that or not. I mean, that's really at the end of the day, you can kind of sum up all those numbers to, you take a pretty reasonable profit margin out on a 10-year period. This is a approximately $200 million contract. So 10% is $20 million, and that's about where that delta comes from. So when you kind of step back and look at it all, that's really kind of the difference that we're looking at. And the only other thing I'd mention is that we have not, this is obviously fully apples to apples. We have not looked at the synergies across public works in any real way here. So we haven't looked at shared equipment with road maintenance. We're planning on them having their own full-time mechanic. Well, that's not how we would expect to run that. We have a mechanic shop. We have opportunities there. Same thing with seasonally shared equipment with road maintenance, figuring out used equipment. And there's also it's also expecting 100% staffing 100% of the time. So from a county cost perspective, that's probably not the most accurate assumption. We certainly know our current contractor doesn't run 25 people, 12 months a year. But we wanted to keep everything as if, so I just wanted to make sure we kind of talk through the softer sides of that a little bit, because there's some realities and some differences within that will play out inevitably if we go with this all.
Yeah, and just to add on that, as far as operating our facilities, at the current time and even in a new contract, anytime we create a better way of doing something more efficient, and we're like, yeah, this is great, we're making this more efficient, the county sees absolutely no benefit to that because the money goes still into the contractor's pocket and we don't see that cost savings. So there are some things that we already know we could make more efficient, but we don't do it yet because we won't see any benefit for the cost of it.
So has the city renewed their contract yet for the waste disposal that they were working on with, did they end up with Republic or did they end up with Waste Management?
Waste management.
Waste Management. And so so with what you're talking about here with the transfer stations, we would then integrate with what the city is doing, and we should be at a package then that is complete for at least the next, 10 years or so?
Yes.
Okay, and so in the city's contract with Waste Management, I believe, the last I heard, they were talking about using for diversion instead of Urbanco, going to Adams County and the new landfill over there.
Correct.
Is that what they ended up doing, and is that landfill open yet or not?
They did go with Waste Management, and currently the garbage, our bypass goes to Wenatchee.
Okay,
Until Adams County is open. We did take a visit, we toured the landfill. It should be open by, I believe it's March or April of this year.
so by taking it to Adams County instead of taking it to Wenatchee, is there any savings to the system? Or is that differential in cost left with Waste Management?
They're actually, they're giving us the Adams County rate right now
Okay,
for Wenatchee. So
okay,
Well, and really, they're not taking a lot right now because in the winter time, the volumes can mostly be handled at Waste to Energy.
Yeah.
So they're very low volumes, so they basically, they honored the Adams County rate, knowing that it'll be open before the volumes kick up and the real tonnage starts arriving.
okay, thank you.
What causes that? Why is it lower in the winter versus summer?
yeah, garbage is seasonal. It's kind of a funny thing, I know. And so, December, January, February, our garbage tonnage drops quite a bit. And the city of Spokane, since we're in the agreement, keeping the waste to energy facility running efficiently, they need our garbage. And so they take 100% of it during those 3 months.
And what are our current tipping fees at the transfer stations?
We are at $125.40 per ton.
So like if someone's coming in, a customer like me, what is my cost?
It depends on how much you bring in. Your minimum fee would be a $20 total with the environmental programs charge and the minimum tipping fee, so you would
So
pay
when
$20.
it's $20.
Unless you brought in an awful lot of garbage, and then.
Yeah, no, so for the normal customer in, that's just a homeowner that's getting rid of a truckload of garbage, it's $20 then.
I think it's at 280 pounds or less, it's $20.
And you were saying, trying to keep those low. So under your scenario of us owning it and all of that, what do you think that I'm assuming you've thought through what some of those minimums would be as we progress, so is that the 28%?
No, I didn't calculate out minimums, but yeah.
So the minimum is an interesting conversation. There are folks, especially the curbside haulers, that would like to see our minimums raised. And the argument is that we would see less traffic, less wear and tear at our facilities. and more would go to curbside. So they would get to haul it. Technically, the higher your minimum, if anybody who's delivering, any individual who's dropping off less than that 280 pounds is paying more than that 125 per ton, because they're only bringing in 100 pounds of garbage, but they're paying that $20 minimum, $30 minimum. So it's actually kind of an interesting conversation. We personally don't, our current philosophy, I don't want to say we personally, our current philosophy has been to keep it reasonably low. We know our constituents like to come and drop off a truckload of garbage, and we're not trying to currently disincentivize that.
I would say is, just hearing from people around and being a user myself, I would think, for our citizens, we would want to keep that minimum, so I would.
Yes, so in that rate scenario, we did not increase, in that particular scenario, it didn't increase. We just used the per ton charge instead of the minimum.
Because there's certainly people in the unincorporated county that don't have the opportunity to have waste management come and pick up. So, that's why there's a lot of citizens that do use it, because they don't have the ability. So, that's why I'm asking, because I want to make sure that we're being cognizant of them and not putting them at a disadvantage, because they don't have the opportunity to have waste management come to their house.
Yeah, for that 10-year scenario, those rates stayed the same. So, but we'll always keep them in mind.
So on one of your earlier grids here that just shows the 2024 existing contract versus the 2025 with contract, why is there such a substantial jump from 24 to 25? I guess kind of rolling it back to, I should have probably asked that at the beginning, but
No,
what are the big drivers on why you see that? Because if you're looking at the current contractor amount at the $101 per ton, why did they see a $24 jump?
Well, recall that was also predicated by a contract they signed 10 years ago.
Okay,
So they're
but it had to have had increases in it, right? That they just didn't anticipate,
Yes, exactly. In
that they didn't
fact,
forecast maybe as beneficial to themselves as they should have? Is that
yes,
essentially what happened?
yes,
Okay.
it did. And in fact, if we were going to say, hey, we wanted, because the current contract has an extension clause in there, we could just extend. But Waste Connections is like, no, we need a new contract.
Got it. Okay.
Costs went up at skyrocketed, especially with transport. So you'll see, there may be some hidden costs in the transport. They're paying $9 per ton to transport waste at this time. Some of that may be hidden in some other pieces of their, but you'll see the new cost is almost double. And transport has gone up a tremendous amount, so, yeah. But it's just got that much more expensive.
Okay.
And just so you know, they did propose, they were the second
Yeah, they came in
scoring,
second, yeah.
and they were even more expensive than Waste Management.
Okay.
So follow-up, when does this contract then officially expire?
November of this year.
Okay, that is thus the need to make some decisions this year.
So however the commissioners would like us to move forward, we would like to get direction soon at the start of this year, because we have a lot of work to do regardless, whether we're negotiating a contract with Waste Management and dealing with the turnover and the transfer, or whether we're writing job specs and we're negotiating. One of the things that is beneficial to us if we go in the self-run scenario is that our current contract with Waste Connections, I wouldn't say quite obligates is the word, but the peaceful transition of staff is contemplated in that, whether it was to another contractor or to us. So we would be immediately looking at the existing staff that we would like to hire, retain, obviously apply to the jobs through our systems. Same thing with negotiating over existing equipment. If we can pick up some stuff that's on site, we'd obviously have everything looked at, how our mechanics go through everything. But if we can get some stuff at used pricing as opposed to new, all that work would have to be done in the next 9 months.
So follow up on the workforce and the wages. So what kind of wages did you build into your scenario?
Sure.
We found, we actually looked at City of Spokane job descriptions and we pegged all of our salaries at their top classification. We also budgeted 55% cost for benefits and as well as a 10% cost of overhead. So we feel that our wages are padded in a way, so we won't be surprised when we hire.
Do you anticipate if we run the transfer stations in-house that the hours of operations will be expanded? That's kind of a common thing that I hear from constituents because the hours change based on the seasonality of it, but some people get a little upset about
Yes.
the what they see as limited hours.
No, yes, and this is one of the things about control. We have better control over our hours. And we do intend on creating the hours that, yes.
And it
Okay.
would be consistent with the city's waste energy plant right now. So
Okay.
whatever facility they're going to, whether it's waste energy, Colbert, the Valley, the hours would all be the same through the entire year.
Yeah, one of the things we do, it's just, I know it's an oxymoron, but government run, we actually do have some more flexibility to really adjust. And the solid waste climate legislatively is dynamic right now. There's a lot going on. EPR is, at the forefront today, but we do see changes coming with organics, food waste. And with those changes, we have a lot of ability to shift and move when it's our facility and we're the ones running it and making those decisions every day, as opposed to a change in legislation of how we do business, then we're just forced into a contract renegotiation and kind of on our heels because an operator just gets to tell us, oh, well, this is going to cost this, and this is a legislative change that we didn't have control over, so you must renegotiate. So I think we have some ability to be nimble, and I think we're going to see some substantial changes to the system in this 10-year period.
So we have some ongoing monitoring and predominantly monitoring, but maintenance cost for the landfills, the north side, the Mike and all that. That cost is not part of this situation. This is just for the transfer stations. But where are we covering that cost at now? And is that the best way to cover that cost? Or do you guys have ideas that would say, we ought to be thinking about doing this or that?
Yes, so
These are legacy costs, so,
Yeah, I know.
yeah, I mean, we inherited it, all of us.
We had a large pot of money.
Yeah.
That's been slowly shrinking. And
Yeah.
I know it's not the best scenario, but what we did do this year, starting this year, was we are taking part of what we call the environmental programs charge. That's that flat charge per vehicle. Is going towards landfill closure. It's not
Okay.
funding the entire thing. What we'd ideally like to see is to get the system whole again and be able to have the city of Spokane Valley and Liberty Lake in there so that we can, more of an equal pay towards that for all the citizens, but,
And especially since they were a major contributor to one of the landfills,
yeah,
you ought to be sharing the cost.
yeah. So I know there's some other things, I'm not sure, we're still looking at.
There's opportunities that the city of Spokane currently, they ran through their pot as well, and they're rolling those costs into their solid waste rates. We have, in our current projections, regardless of this, our anticipation was, I think we're at 25%. We're covering it with our rates this year, next year 50%, the following year 75%, and then that fund is gone. If we covered it 100%, it'd be gone, I think, by early 25. So this gives us about a 3-year runway to decide if there's another opportunity. It could be part of our discussion coming up right next with regards to the APA and whether that is a logical nexus for funding of landfill closure. But we do know that the city of Spokane has chosen to use their solid waste rates. There's certainly a clear nexus with using the solid waste rates. It would be nice if we got a little bit more out of the Valley and Liberty Lake because of their contributions to those landfills. But we can choose to cover it out of solid waste rates.
Okay.
Scott, I see you raise your hand.
Hi, Commissioners. I just wanted to call out Lindsay and Deb, and with Kyle's help. This was a great analysis. When Deb originally brought this to me 2.5 years ago, I was highly suspect that we'd actually be able to develop a program where we could take this on and do it in a financially deliberate way. But they've done a really good job, and as you see, they built in some very conservative estimates on the high end of things just to make sure that we didn't miss anything. Obviously, some of those numbers will be lower, and I think if the decision is that we run it, there will be some opportunities for even a wider gap on here. And Commissioner French called out a really good one in regards to our landfill closures, being able to use some of this excess to be able to contribute to that as well, and then to be able to maintain our rates into a more affordable fashion going forward. So I think they did a really nice job and gives us a pretty solid ground to make an informed decision on whichever direction we go.
Thank you. Any other questions right now? I mean, this is the first time we're all hearing it, so.
So I just wanted to keep it in mind for everybody. If there's anything else you would like to see from us, if there are further questions we can have, if there's a direction you would like to take one way or another, one thing I would ask and I would like to put forward is that whichever way we go, we would like it in a resolution so that you can give us formal direction to move forward. We're not necessarily executing a contract with Waste Management, and we do go self-run, when we can have legal just write up a resolution that says, go forth and do that. We'll still have more to bring back to you when we have some costs and some acquisitions and some capital components. But we would like to have a formal go forth from the board that says, start making moves, because it's gonna take us the year to get set up.
And so what are you looking for time frame for that?
Do you think we could vote on something by the 1st of February or first meeting in February? Is that reasonable? Or even sooner if you're more comfortable?
I'm fine moving forward.
Yeah, I think you've done great work.
Yeah.
So thank you for all your calculations, many calculations.
So I think if we do that, then between now and then, any commissioner would have the opportunity to come and
Yes.
meet with you, to talk to you, get questions answered. And then just, it would get briefed the meeting prior, to make sure that everyone's aware that it's gonna be on the next legislative agenda. So as a resolution, I guess I would just wanna make sure that legal has looked at the contract to make sure that as we look to continue or get out of it, that's all been through legal before I make a decision moving forward, that I wanna make sure that that's been looked at, just to make sure they're in the loop.
Absolutely, and I know our representative from the prosecutor's office is going through it right now. They've been with us every step of the way with regards to our RFP and the contract with potential contract with Waste Management. They've looked at the Waste Connections and then are also looking at drafting resolutions. So if we're rowing this direction, we'll see if we have any further questions from any of the commissioners. And if not, then when the resolution's ready, we'll come back and brief the board and put it on the ledge agenda. Are we kind of nodding in the same direction right now?
I think so. I think you've got 5 head nods to move forward that way. And like I said, the commissioners all have the opportunity between now and then to come and ask more questions. And then that way the briefing then provides that other opportunity to just have everybody, if there's any other questions that have come forward, to inform everybody about.
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time and thoughtful attention to this. It's a lot of work in the making.
Yes, thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you. No, and I appreciate all the hard work, because I know it's not easy. So similar to what Commissioner Mulder said, it's just, it's not easy putting all those scenarios together, but it's like, it's gotta be well thought out. You know, what I don't wanna have happen is what happened when the contract expired with the city, and it was just suddenly, the city didn't give us the opportunity to really do anything. So I wanna make sure that again, legally we can do all that, so that way it can be I would say, peaceful, easy transition, you know, a well thought out transition, instead of, here you go, show up today to take over the transfer stations.
Well, the good news is we do have the attorney that wrote our current contract, we have him on board right now, and we can, you know, run through the transition language in the current contract with him to make sure that we are set to do the things we need.
Is that an outside attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
Which attorney?
It was,
DiGiulio?
Hawkins, Delaney, no, Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood. They're from back east. But they specialize in solid waste system facility contracts.
Connected.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so you'll make sure we are aware of all that. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Rob,
Not sure if he's behind us or not.
They were in the. They were sitting
in the room. Okay, yep, they're right behind us. Here, let me grab them.
Enjoy your day.
thank you.
Try and
You
stay
too.
warm, I hear it's gonna be.
I know, it's gonna get cold.
Thank you.
I got a question for Rob before you get started, if you don't mind.
Yes, no, that's okay.
I'm up here.
And you can move down one if we need to have.
You wanna go up?
Or have.
Oh, I'm fine.
Come sit at the table.
Come on out, Amy.
We want everyone at the table, this is a big table.
Okay.
Okay, before we get started, Commissioner French just said he had a question.
Yeah, I just got a general question. You know, I've been through the presentation you did here on the APA for the valley and everything, and you know, so it's a pretty thorough presentation, but I know that we've had extensive conversations about doing the same thing on the West Plains.
Yes.
And so I'm as we go through this, I want to make sure that I have my expectations aligned with yours. Is that, would you expect to have the same level of information or detail as we try and do something for the West Plains that you've done for the valley and Spokane, Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer? Or is there just isn't that depth of information that's available yet to be able to generate that kind of detail? I'm just trying to anticipate what can we expect to be able to present to voters as we take this out to on a ballot measure and stuff. So I'm just trying to get a flavor for what kind of information do you think we might have available to us, so that we can inform the voters about, you know, what they might be able to expect on the West Plains.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and I appreciate that comment. Over the weekend, I was thinking more about this and actually talking with staff and others in the community. And I actually, for this presentation, have a little bit more information in here that so we can talk about the West
Okay.
Plains today.
Okay.
Recognizing there are significant concerns
Yeah.
out there. And the even the staff recommendation section of this, includes a recommendation to look deeper
Yeah.
into the West Plains, to engage more with the community, because frankly, spoiler alert, and we'll get to the end here. I think more time is needed. I think more
Yeah.
communications with leadership on the West Plains is needed to really suss out these issues.
Okay.
It took over 20 years of this sort of discussion to bring something in on the SVRP. So, but I will get to that. And
Okay,
actually,
okay.
part of the presentation today is really to basically present the SVRP portion of this, and then to present our recommendations. And then I've teed up a conversation
Okay.
for West Plains, and we can go as long or short as the board desires today on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you. This is another one of our biggest initiatives of 2024 for Public Works is, I think most of you are all aware, the existing aquifer protection area measure, I guess I would call it, is expiring here. It runs out next year. And we've been in several discussions about bringing this back to the ballot for the voters to decide whether or not to extend for another 20 years. So there's a lot of work and an even much shorter time frame for our team here if the board would like us to move forward with this. So Rob, Ben, and Amy, I think you've met all of them before here from our water resources team. We're going to walk us through a little presentation on the EPA and have some discussions about how to move forward.
Thank you very much, Kyle. The first couple of slides here are very text heavy, and I'm certainly not going to read through them, other than to say this particular slide is a condensed summary of the sorts of activities that basically describes the APA and identifies the types of expenditures that APAs can be used for. And I did a little bit of research for this presentation. It appears to me as though the bar to establish an APA is actually pretty low. In terms of, it doesn't have to be a singular aquifer, I mean, just protection of subterranean waters. 3636 is right here, it's a relatively short RCW. If a county authority decides they want to do this, they can develop, have a public hearing, develop a vision, and go forward with it. In the case of Spokane County and the aquifer protection area that we currently enjoy, we're really leveraging the bottom two bullets, the bottom few as far as groundwater monitoring, public education, and that's pretty much it as far as what we do with the APA dollars here. Next slide, please. So in Spokane County, the current APA, of course, it's located over our Rathdrum Prairie, Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie aquifer. Basically, it's $15 a year added to people's taxes. We do have additional fees for businesses based on the line size coming into their business. As Kyle has mentioned, the current APA is going to be expiring soon, at the end of 2025, and so we're here to pass that going forward. One of the aspects of the APA is that it does include the City of the Valley and Liberty Lake. We have agreements with them, and we return money to them every year. We return approximately $500,000 a year to the City of the Valley, about $60,000 a year to Liberty Lake from a proportional share of APA funds that we don't spend. Next slide, please. Oh, one last thing on the APA in Spokane County to update them. We've been in touch with the elections group. We need to have all of the information into them by early May to get on the election on the calendar for August. I've already been in touch with these with the City of Liberty Lake and City of the Valley in terms of sharing the resolutions that they used before and the agreements so that we can work forward. We have efficiencies. So what do we do locally with the APA? And the most visible work that we do is education. Products like the Aquifer Atlas, our Water Resource Center. We have a first-class team of environmental educators who have done a fabulous job of establishing credibility within our school districts. They come to us. And we've done that because we've shown that we offer quality educational products that actually help them meet their objectives. We're more than just a cool trip. We actually help them meet educational objectives. And it's taken a lot of work on the part of our program to do that, and we're very proud of what we do. We also
Rob, before you get, you might talk a little bit about what we've done with these funds in the past, because I think that's informative in terms of what we might be able to do on the West Plains, because, I mean, these funds actually contributed to the elimination of septic tanks and things like that in the valley.
Yes, they have. And this presentation is going to present a financial background of how much money we've created. Well, this resonates with you. The APA, it generates about $1.5 million in this community. It doesn't really go far in advancing infrastructure, but it funds planning and it funds education and then the monitoring program. And that's where we spend a significant amount of our APA funds on monitoring on a regular basis, over 3 dozen monitoring wells over the aquifer. And again, the APA in Spokane County was developed as part of the water quality management program that was 20 years of discussion in this community. And so the monitoring is really to demonstrate the effectiveness of our septic tank elimination program. And we present that information. We present for this presentation a link, but it's available on our website. People can go and can do a deep dive into our summary report as deep as they want to go, or we have more user-friendly information as well.
So Rob, one question I have as we get started is, does everyone in the county pay the APA fee? Is it a certain area? I mean, if the West Plains isn't part of it, is it just the Rapid Aquifer?
Right.
And do you have a map of what that looks like as to who?
Oh, Mary, thank you very much. Next slide, please.
Sorry. I didn't mean to get ahead of you.
So this particular slide presents the APA area. The dark blue is the current APA area. It's basically everything west of the to the state line to the Spokane municipal boundary, and then it also includes up in the northern portions through Peone, down through Peone Creek and in that valley. And then connects all the way up to 9 Mile Falls. The City of Spokane is presented there in light blue because they did participate in the APA between 1984 and 2004. Since 2004, it's just been the dark blue portion.
So not all citizens are paying into it, just citizens that are affected by that specific area. So those
Correct,
funds are going
yeah.
to those
Right.
citizens.
And so
So these can be us, we can draw these boundaries at will, however the commissioners would like, based on voter districts. The intent of this boundary here is that what drains into the SBRP was the thought at the time.
And only those voters are the ones voting on whether to include this or not.
Exactly.
Okay, just making sure for everybody.
And we have been in touch with the elections department. There have been some minor changes to precinct sizes, shapes, as well as some annexations. So those will be addressed as we go forward. But they're, Mike and his team have already been made aware of that and looking at that. The next slide, please. Thanks, Ron. So I'm just going to go through some slides here of just the financial side of the APA. And so this particular slide is a representation of annual revenues from the APA. And you'll see up through 2004, 2005, it generated just north of $2.5 million a year. And that was when the city of Spokane was participating. when they came out, then it dropped down to just below $1.5 million a year.
And does each city get their own proportion of these funds, or does it stay with the county?
So then, the way that it works is then that the county takes all of that money in, and then the water resources program is funded out of that, as well as the administrative side of that program, that did like our billings, our water billings, and for many of our commercial customers, we base their bill based on how much water they use. So we stay in touch with the water districts, we know how much water they're using, and that tells us how much wastewater of theirs we're treating. And so basically, we fund that with that, sorry, long answer. After we do our thing, then we return the money to them on a proportional basis to their population.
By city. So
yeah.
like in the scenario, the city of Spokane is not part of it, but like the city of the Valley is getting a proportionate share that they're using to
Right.
determine.
Right,
So in
And so
essence,
is Liberty Lake.
what we take off the top is all kind of for the benefit of the whole APA area. Our whole groundwater monitoring program, educational program, which is open to everybody in the county, and then the administration of the APA and the necessary surrounding tasks around that comes off the top because that does benefit everybody, and then the balance is returned.
And as the city of Spokane, if they choose to be part of it, they understand that and do we have is it an agreement that we have with the city?
we have agreements, negotiated agreements with.
And if the city of Spokane is involved, actually more gets returned to the others because the city of Spokane is.
Helping with those administrative costs, because it's just an administrative overhead that would be normal to any
Right.
grant program.
Are the dollar limits that you mentioned earlier in terms of what's being assessed now, is that the limit statutorily, or is a dollar amount a flexible number that it's just based upon community needs?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's an interesting conversation. Truly is really the board's decision at the end of the day, but certainly in concert with the participating municipalities, obviously, and what they would support.
So again, back to this slide, generates on the order of currently, or for the past 20 years, has been generating just south of $1.5 million a year. Currently, in the balance of the fund is about $6.5 million. That's what's currently in the fund. Next slide, please. So this is what we've been spending just APA money on. So for between 1999 and 2010, we were spending quite a bit of APA money on the sewering program, on the STEP program. Okay. And then the STEP program, septic tank elimination, and we stopped routing APA funds to that in 2010 when we functionally stopped the STEP program. When I took a lot of the momentum out of it, I'll just put it that way. So the next slide, please. So then following that, then these are funds from the APA that were being diverted to help pay down the debt on the wastewater treatment facility. So this is a reflection of what we've done for the last decade or so, using some APA funds to pay off the wastewater treatment facility. And then at the same time, next slide, please. So then that brings in that yellow line. That is the Water Resources Department. We had a bit of our cost went up a little bit when the plant came online in 2009, 10, 11. I think there was some additional educational activities that we were doing at that time. There was other just water-related issues going on in the community. But we're really trying to, settle this in, and the vision going forward is essentially the same for us, and that is to continue to provide education to the community and to continue the aquifer monitoring program. That's what we'd like to do. And finally, one last slide. This represents the contributions that have been returned to the City of the Valley. That's the blue, City of the Valley, and then the green line down below is Liberty Lake, and that's been on the order of $60,000 a year. We also have an agreement with Millwood. They have a very small contribution, and they have not asked for any of that money back.
So in this slide, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand it. So where the yellow line is that's the total expense, or is it adding the City of the Valley and Liberty Lake to it to get closer to what that?
The yellow line is Amy's group in education and
So
our
we'd add all
groundwater
those together.
monitoring, right. But that also includes, when we do educational activities out at the Salty Flats, for instance, or any of our field-based activities. So if we're engaged in educational activities, we're funding it with APA funds.
You're correct, it is the summation.
It's some of those, so I mean, we're closer to, then we're closer to our revenue.
Correct.
Our expenses, because this makes it look like our expenses are way less than the revenue we're collecting. Because then my next question will be like, what has been the APA collection amount? It's $15. Has that been since the 80s?
Correct.
And we
yes.
haven't changed that amount?
Haven't changed it.
So, okay. That's why it's a little unclear here. It almost seems like we're not using all of those dollars. So.
Okay.
And, and as you can see that transition from, the STEP program to, and we haven't taken the time to get into it, we certainly can here, but the groundwater monitoring program is probably the educational program is amazing, but the groundwater monitoring has been so informative to what we've done, and we can take a deep dive into that if you want. Amy and team have been working on some incredible tools to show that. But really, you don't know how successful we've been with our sewering of the valley without that. And it tells a very informative story about our groundwater. And so with 40 monitoring sites that we have the best collection of information in this region. And when it comes to groundwater, you need those long horizons to really see. Trends don't change very quickly. And it's really invaluable to keep that going. And we can really see, and if we want to come back or take a detour at some point and talk through that, what we have seen and what we're seeing now, it just helps. It's such a great measure for us to point us in the right direction for what we should be doing.
Well, I think we'll need that because as you move forward, if it goes out to a vote, we've got to have that education ready and planned and everybody on the same page to make sure that we're getting the correct information out there.
We were actually hoping to roll out some of that water quality information as part of this presentation today, but in the interest of time and understanding that we really wanted to get into the administrative side of this, we took it out. But we're more than happy to come back. We'd love to share with you that information because it tells a very compelling story. We've done well, but there's more to do.
Commissioner Waldron?
So how does that work with what the city and the water or the valley purveyors have? Like, are there state requirements around groundwater sampling? And then how does your sampling coordinate with those?
Okay, so the water.
I'm assuming the purveyors have to do certain things.
Absolutely, and they're governed.
How does this work in
Right.
symbiosis?
Very good question. So the water providers are regulated by the State Department of Health, and they have very strict monitoring guidelines that they have to follow. And so they do that. And that's totally independent of what we do. This aquifer monitoring program, or the aquifer protection program, was born out of the water quality management program that the county developed as part of the ongoing aquifer discussions in the 70s and the 80s.
Okay.
And so, so this is a standalone aquifer monitoring program. Now, to that, when my predecessor, Stan Miller, was developing this program, he was working in concert with a lot of the water purveyors out there. And indeed, many of those water purveyors actually reached out to us and said, well, let's work together on this. You want water quality data, we need help with our monitoring. And so we were actually, for a while, doing some of the purveyors' monitoring for them. Because we have highly trained and skilled folks who know how to do it right and to do it consistently time after time. And so for some of the less sophisticated water providers, they were more than happy to have us come and help them. So we were kind of scratching each other's backs at that point. But again, the water providers have very clear and distinct monitoring programs that are separate from these.
And I'll just add that this is a voluntary program, so we're not under any sort of regulatory requirements. So the thought was just to monitor for certain constituents or analytes that made sense for the county at the time in terms of looking at the impacts of that STEP program in improving water quality. So a lot of what we look for in the water is similar to what the water purveyors are, but also different. Like, we don't look at some of the same things, just because that's how our program was developed.
So like if we're looking at the next 20 years, would we look at maybe looking at monitoring different elements?
Yes.
Or nutrients or?
You bet we could. As a matter of fact, when Ben came on board back in 2007 or 8, one of the first things we did is we sat down with our other water resources person at the time, and we kind of reevaluated what we were looking at. We were looking at stormwater areas, particularly, areas of stormwater where it's concentrated, like some of the valley areas, like some of those sumps, and then also looking at some of the wells along the river for different types of analytes and water quality measures. So we actually did, and we're always open for improvement.
Well, I'm just thinking all the $1 billion the city put into getting the stormwater out of the river.
You bet.
And the combined sewer overflow. I mean, it's changed, a lot has changed in 20 years.
You bet.
And then do you monitor still some of the wells that are in the city, even though they're not part of the area?
Yes, we
Because
do
it's all
still.
part of the aquifer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would also offer that we also, if we get a phone call from a school district within the city of Spokane, we don't say no.
If they have concerns.
Yeah, if Spokane Public Schools,
And so we have, our regular monitoring points are some of ours, some of local purveyors, some of the city. Everybody plays pretty nice in the sandbox when it comes to this, because the data is just so valuable. It's interesting though, is it's not the point in time. It is those long trend lines, because you are talking about, small percentages. And it takes a long time for those percentages to change, but man, do they tell you something about where we're going. Because they take a while to move, but they also take a while to unmove, would be, or however you want to say it, to reverse trend takes a while. And we have we really look at that 20-year plus horizon, you can really see what's going on.
Yeah, I'm just starting to think about how you would talk to voters about why this is necessary for another 20 years. So just keeping that in mind, like what are those things that we're tracking that are really important to people's health
Right.
and the environment?
And I'd like to comment too, just going back to one of the things in that first slide, the RCW, as far as allowable expenditures, is written very well. That's a pretty comprehensive set of what you can do. So we're really honing on those last two bullets from the county's staff and resources perspective, the valley chooses to use their funding, to address stormwater needs that they have. In talks with Marlene over at the city, should the city opt in, that's really where they'd want to spend their focus with their allotment. They just have so many, now that the CSOs are relatively managed. And sorry, random side note on that. They didn't overflow during that storm in November. In amazing rainfall we got, they didn't overflow, which is really something. But either way, they still have a lot of continuing stormwater challenges in the city, and that's one of their motivations for potentially rejoining us.
Yeah, the seventies and eighties were an interesting time because that's also when we developed the swale program, to deal with the stormwater drainage that was outside of the city of Spokane. The city had the combined sewer and stormwater, but the county did not. So the swales and all of these efforts to try and protect the aquifer were all done in the late seventies, early eighties, the STEP program and all of that kind of stuff. We now are the beneficiaries of all that investment of time and energy.
Well, and there's probably a whole new way swales have kind of become the old-fashioned swales. There are newer ways and maybe using less land intensive, stormwater treatment, so we can have more land available for housing and building. How do we do that, there's lots of new opportunities that we could talk with voters about, that we could spend the dollars to help innovation so that we can not just do things the same way as 20 years ago. Anyway.
Kyle has introduced me to a platform called Thought Exchange that school districts have used.
Spokane Schools uses that.
Yeah.
And it's like a texting program to communicate with folks.
We may find some value with that. Next slide, please. So we're gonna pivot here and get into a little bit about areas, and then I've got a slide here which shows just basically in numbers about the number of parcels that we currently collect from, and then what sort of additional, this is really more to give a sense of scale of just in the Airway Heights area. And then this particular graphic shows an additional 8,500. That would be in the area basically from the Palisades to the out to Airway Heights. I think it'd be more instructive if we go to the next slide, please. So this slide shows the current APA is in the green, if you will, with the 77,000 parcels. Then the city of Spokane, if they were to join, would add that 80,000. And then moving west, that light blue parcel with 2625, that would be Airway Heights. The 8,600 additional parcels are those rural precincts with the red outline around them. And then, as I was talking with some folks out on the West Plains and thinking about it myself, it was like, we really ought to be thinking about including Medical Lake and Cheney as well as a potential. And if we do that, that adds about another 11,000, that basically doubles it again. And I have some just rough numbers here that we can kick around as far as if we were to keep, the same $15 figure, for instance.
And I've had preliminary conversations with the folks at Medical Lake and Cheney about the potential of being part of this and stuff. And there does
Right.
seem to be interest to be part of this and stuff, there, as well as, around Silver Lake and those areas too. So when you talk about the unincorporated area, I think that should be looked at as well.
Yeah, so, just, thank you, and I appreciate that. If we looked at including basically the area that's identified there and Medical Lake and Cheney, the unincorporated area, our rough math brings it in at around 19,000 additional parcels. And at $15, that could generate on the order of $280,000.
So can I just follow up on that? So why those particular areas? You're talking about into the Rathrum Prairie, Spokane?
No, we're talking about a totally separate,
Got it, okay.
totally separate aquifer protection area for the West Plains, because it's a different aquifer.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to understand, because this seemed like you were adding them into this one.
I know it,
Okay,
Thank
maybe
you.
a different.
That's kind of part of where we want this discussion to now kind of fold into is
because
what's next? How do we want to look at this moving forward with regards to the SVRP by itself, the West Plains in and of itself with their own aquifer and their own priorities and goals, and what activities move us forward? We have 40 years plus of history with the SVRP and what this program has done. And I think we can pretty well see a path for what we'll be doing for the next 20 years. Then we have this discussion on the West Plains that is certainly emergent and of high importance. The what is still for discussion and being developed, but we wanted to just, while we're talking about APA or APAs in a plural, let's kind of have this conversation about everything.
Right, I guess I was just trying to, because at least Airway Heights has that interlocal with the city for water coming from this aquifer that we're on right now in this building. So there is, I mean, we have to think about too, that came up in the last 10 years, that they benefit from a safe aquifer because they're now buying water from the city from that aquifer. So just another
Yeah.
nuance. So that's why I was like trying to figure out, because they're getting water from this aquifer now, but we know there's issues with the West Plains aquifer as well, so.
Yeah, it's really, this is a conversation full of nuance and really just developing the approach that, the commissioners would like to move forward with.
But there's the other opportunity too. I think that Airway Heights still has grant money available to it to drill a well that would tap into the Spokane Valley Rathrum Prairie aquifer. If they could find the water rights to be able to do that, or somehow find a path that would be able to get him to do that. So that does directly tie the two areas together. But as Commissioner Waldron indicates, I mean, they do buy water from the city now, and quite frankly, unless there's a fix here imminent, the whole West Plains is gonna be buying water from the city of Spokane. So there's a direct linkage between the West Plains and the valley and stuff, and so maybe there is just one aquifer protection area that is much larger than what we currently have.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'm bullish on aquifer water up on the West Plains.
Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Let's go through a couple slides. I'd like to table that and come right back to that point you made here as we go through this.
And I just didn't know if there was any legal nuances to that, because it doesn't matter where you are, you can pay into another aquifer protection. I mean, I just didn't know. I haven't read the RCW about how that all works itself out.
The board draws the lines on who gets to vote on this and who gets to be assessed on this, and frankly make the rules on how we spend it. If a municipality is to enter in, they do so voluntarily, and we have to have an agreement that we come together upon with how those funds will be
Got it.
spent or returned.
So if it's unincorporated area, It's the call of the commissioners.
Absolutely.
But then we need that city to have
But
a.
even the greater APA, basically the cities are an opt-in. They can't do this on their own.
Right.
So they're kind of in that, are we opting in or opting out to the program you all develop?
I'll give you a copy of this.
Oh, for a little fun reading?
Well, there really is, there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
So,
It's a short RCW.
Hey, those are always good.
so this is our recommendation at this point. And again, our hope is to put the APA on the ballot for the aquifer, the SVRP this year. And so we basically would propose moving forward with very few changes. There's sufficient funding to continue to support our program. The City of the Valley and Liberty Lake are seemingly satisfied with the way things are going. And I'm thinking, although I've not engaged in these conversations, that the city would be interested in having some of those additional funds to help with their stormwater program. And then, as it relates to the West Plains, gosh, we just see a need for more community dialogue and discussions with leaders out there and developing that community consensus on what it is. Next slide, please.
And I'll just add on to that, when you think about the communication and the program of itself and what voters are voting on, those in the unincorporated, the city of Spokane Valley and the city of Liberty Lake have voted this forward twice, have 40 years of history of paying, and the city of Spokane has a past with it and a current, although they're certainly integral as they've been in the program before. The agreements with them, all those entities, exist. I mean, they're 20 years old, they need to be refreshed, but they exist. The path forward is relatively smooth, I would argue, just depending on, and we've certainly heard back anecdotally, or through who we've talked to, that they're all interested. Moving this through the legislative actions, they both have to pass resolutions, then we have to get interlocal agreements together. There's a lot to do in between now and May. So that's part of the consideration as we think and talk about the West Plains as well.
So as you, revisit that conversation with the city of Spokane, I was on the council, actually, was one of them that led the effort to get out of the APA at that time. And the reason was because the city justified getting into the APA to begin with because of the STEP program. And they needed to really get rid of a lot of septic tanks. And so they'd accomplished that by the 2004. So they said, well, okay, we're done with our part of it, we're out. And but now stormwater is the big issue for the city of Spokane. So I can see why they would want to be re-engaged with this program because of the stormwater issue that continues to be a challenge for the city and stuff. So just for a little historical perspective, why did the city get out in 2004? It's because we had done everything we needed to do for STEP, but now it's a whole nother dialogue.
New requirements around all sorts of new contaminants.
One thing I would just add to is the city plays a big role in the success of this measure. It barely passed without the city of Spokane's voters. It was nail biter. I don't think it was quite as close the first time around, but I don't recall.
No, it was an overwhelming approval in '84, and then 2004, it actually wound up getting over the hump as mail-in ballots came in.
Do the next slide. You want to talk a little bit more?
Go ahead.
So I kind of Googled to look sort of where the aquifer itself is. There's a substantial amount of folks that are in the protection area that are pretty far outside of where, I mean, sort of some of the maps I'm finding here that show where the actual aquifer itself are. Do you think maybe that kind of played a part on why it was so close? I mean, when you you've got a big group of people that are above the aquifer that no longer vote for it, but you got a lot of people that are not above the aquifer that are voting and paying into it. I mean,
Yeah, and we receive a lot of phone
have we
calls.
made the pitch on why folks
well,
that in some
it's-
cases are miles from the actual aquifer that are paying into this?
And when we receive calls from those people, we explain to them that they live in an area where runoff from their area has the potential to then make it to and infiltrate into the aquifer.
Okay.
But we recognize it's not perfect. In some of those precincts, there may be somebody who's, you know, on the backside of a ridge and there's like, no, Mr. Lindsay, my water goes to Blanchard. It doesn't go, you know. But for the most part, you know, it's either people who are directly over the aquifer or live in locations like, you know, up along like off of Schaefer Road and up, you know, up Ponderosa and up in that area. Those areas, you know, that water all comes right down and onto the aquifer floor. But so, same thing out in Peon Prairie, out in that area,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Commissioner Jordan?
Just two quick questions, just to clarify the time frame. Did you say the May deadline is for the August ballot? Was that right?
Correct. Yes, sir, yeah.
And then some of those additional communications, stakeholders, developing that consensus, what do you think that should look like as staff on the West Plains piece?
Okay, well, number one, let me just start off by saying that the uses for APA funds are broad. One of them is community planning and development of a comprehensive plan. We think that moving in that direction makes sense, using this for planning, okay? Next slide, please.
Using this, what's this?
APA money can be used.
Are you talking about this aquifer or the West Plains?
West Plains.
Okay.
Now we go into West Plains.
Trying to follow.
I feel comfortable that we can communicate with the community about what we've done in the previous. Thank you, this is what, yeah, I feel that we can move forward confidently and in a strong position for renewing the SVRP, APA as it is. Going forward with the West Plains, gosh, I've heard so many issues from municipalities, from agencies, from residents out there. And everybody, I mean, there's a lot of complex issues and needs out there, and some of them are really very difficult issues to deal with. And they're very expensive issues as well, particularly water supply, providing water. So, you know, Commissioner, I see a need for a coalescence of ideas amongst leaders. I don't see this coming from staff. I see this coming from the business community and the elected officials and those who truly have a stake in the development of the West Plains. That's where it came from for the West Plains. It wasn't staff saying, hey, we should sewer the valley. No, it was leaders, it was community-minded folks who were really leading that charge. That's where I think it needs to come from. We can support that. We're very good at that and providing facilitative environments and those sorts of things. But, you know, this is a community lift and there's a lot of voices that need to be heard here.
I'm gonna go to Pat Bell.
Hey, Commissioners, I just wanted to add, thinking about going to the ballot and some recent considerations. We've had some initial communications with Rob and with Kyle about this. From a communications perspective, I think there's a few things that have been mentioned. I was just going to underscore. One thing we'll need to do in this process, and this doesn't really have much to do with expanding to the city of Spokane or thinking about the West Plains, but just generally with going to the ballot, clearly explaining the need for the funding and providing a justification for the APA is key. That's kind of a first point. I think a lot of what Rob and his team will need to do is help equip our leaders with laying out the concrete benefits of the tax or the fee and providing voters with examples of that. I think just saying, oh, we do public education with this money that's not going to cut the mustard. It's going to need to be some really robust communication around what those concrete benefits are. Clean drinking water, safe drinking water could be an emphasis area. I know everyone's tracking the economic trends right now. Just from some public opinion surveys I've been seeing, our voters here have a lot of reservations around new taxes as of late. I think we've seen some of that, and a lot of that's driven by a deep financial sensitivity with what's happening with the economy. So ergo, the need for a really tight case for the funding and those justifications along with the concrete benefits. I think there's also something to be said for how the county will be and these other jurisdictions will be accountable with the funds that they do get, knowing that's important for some voters' kind of fiscal concerns. And then whether it's a website or something else being contemplated, having those information resources so people know what this is about. A lot of times when you ask people, maybe they'll read the ballot title or something else. They really don't have a sense of what it is other than county government or some other entity asking them for more money. So just a couple of high-level thoughts about communications that would be needed as you're thinking about sending this to the ballot.
Thank you. Commissioner French?
Yeah, and that conversation, thank you, Patrick, is also complicated a little bit by the fact that initially, folks in Airway Heights and were on their own water system, and now they're effectively on the city of Spokane's water system. So they're going, well, wait a minute, PFAS and all that kind of stuff doesn't affect me because I'm the city water system. But the bottom line is it's still part of the Spokane Valley aquifer, and so you do have a connection, you do have an impact and stuff. So part of that education is going to be, really critical to folks that are not on wells, they're on municipal systems and stuff. And so, like I said, I've already had a lot of conversations with folks out on the West Plains, also dealing with the federal level with the senators, state senators, federal senators, and EPA and stuff. So, love to be able to sit down with you and let's create a strategy for how do we get coalescing of all of those folks.
Well, so I would say, because it has been passed twice by a group, I mean, adding a whole other group, like as a Valley resident, looking at my constituents, they're gonna be going, why would I be, so I think they've gotta be separate, kind of like that it's, here's the West Plains one that is for the West Plains to help them, versus what the Valley's already done. Cause I'd be concerned that it could, has there been enough time to get the information out? Would it pass or not? Because it's a new tax for a new fee for them versus an ongoing fee for the others. So I would be more apt to look at it as two separate areas.
Well, and I guess that's kind of what I was getting at with regard to the number of folks on the West Plains that currently are served by the city of Spokane in terms of the water are probably going to have the reaction that says, you know what, I'm already served by city water. It's not a concern for me about what happens in the aquifer because I'm the city water. So, I mean, that's going to be part of the dialogue that we've got to resolve in terms of, who is in and who's out. And, is it one system or is it two? I don't know at this point what's the best model, but there's good arguments for both sides of it.
Yeah. But we've got to be able to move forward.
I know, yeah.
And I would say when we've been thinking about this for quite some time, there's a big need on the West Plains. The what for the West Plains is a real challenge. What do we do with these funds? How do we think about it? What's the amount? I mean, it's hard to even think about a funding amount when we don't know what the game plan is, what
Yeah.
resources do we don't have a bunch of excess staff resources to throw at this, we might have to be thinking about that.
Well, and we as the county are not water purveyors.
No, we're not.
So, I mean, that's the
Yeah.
other thing. This is not coming up with a system for the West Plains. You know, it's again thinking of what is the purpose for.
And these dollars, these are not huge dollar amounts. I mean, we certainly can't fix the West Plains problems on this with a couple $100,000. And setting expectations that it could, or that, this large, or we can protect the aquifer with this $15 per lot charge is not sending the right message. But I think if we think about these separately, there is some planning that we could go forward, and there is a community and a leader dialogue that could say, we do need to be thinking about the aquifer out here, and these are some things we'd like to do, and this is what we, whether it's a planning level, whether it's monitoring level, what does that look like moving forward, and they can have their own APA.
Well, and that's part of the dialogue that's going on at both the state and federal level is, one, defining what the scope of the problem is one part of it, but then trying to develop a resolution or mitigation to it. And then I know at the federal level, there's a lot of conversation going on right now about how they're going to fund it, because ultimately, it's going to require federal dollars to come in here, whether it's fixing the impacts for Fairchild or any of the other stuff. Those are federal dollars that's going to have to be coming to the table and stuff. And so as I talk to the federal delegation, they say, well, we're still trying to figure out, is that something we just pay for, or is it something we pay for as partnership with local jurisdiction, which means that then we are responsible for a plan and maybe matching grant funds or whatever. And so all of that's still in flux. I don't think anybody has a clear vision about, what the solution is going to be, but I do know, we're part of the conversation anyway.
Well, I was gonna say that if my memory serves, when I was on the city council and Airway Heights came to us asking for an emergency intertie for city water, there were two concerns. I mean, one was the discovery of the PFAS, but also their water, they were not recharging their aquifer at the same rate as in the past. And so there are really like two issues that I'm aware of, but I don't know how pervasive, I don't know, like with the city of Cheney, if there are different issues with the growth in that area versus Airway Heights. But there's both the preservation of the aquifer, like the water quantity, as well as the water quality. So anyway, so I have a lot to learn about, for instance, like the growth in the Cheney area, is that a different part of the aquifer?
It's a different aquifer.
So it's different aquifer.
And they have a pretty solid plan out there.
Okay.
We met with the public works
So,
director.
okay.
They have several wells out there. One of them showed contamination in it. They have shut that well down. They did get some funding to drill a new well.
For the city of Cheney.
Mhm. However, it doesn't appear they're going to be drilling that well, because they're finding that if they can shave off the summer irrigation peak, they won't need it. So they are using those funds to invest in an irrigation system for their reclaimed water out of their treatment plant into some of the parks and large green spaces. And if they can take that off of basically the need to pump water out of their wells, that's what they chose to use that money for, was to go and put in, whether you call it a purple pipe system or reclaimed water, and using it solely for irrigation purposes, that they have capacity with their existing 7 wells.
Is the Cheney schools system also involved in that?
Yeah, I think.
Because I would just think with
I
the
believe
growth.
the first places that'll be irrigated are the elementary school and the park, and another one with a future potential expansion out to Eastern. But I think it's the schools and the parks, the government properties that have the large fields. And then Eastern's like a phase 2, but that's not funded yet.
Yeah, I mean, I just know that even without the contamination issue, I think Airway Heights was, I mean, I don't know if you remember at the city, but I believe just the quantity of water was an issue even notwithstanding quality. So, I don't know, just bringing that, there's like a lot of different things going on the West Plains to learn about and conversations to figure out like what would be the appropriate area and, you know, would the cities and the residents there support a new, like to your point, a new tax? So figuring out like what would be the focus of the funds would probably be important. So, that was probably gonna take some time and conversation,
Yeah.
to your point.
Yeah, I'm not.
It is a critical conversation to
It
be
absolutely
having,
is.
but it may not be able to be happened by May.
Well,
to
and
be all
timing
figured
is
out.
a significant concern for us on this.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to get something on the ballot in early May, or get something to the elections department in early May, we can deliver on getting the valley there. I just don't see us making that lift for the West Plains.
So the question is, why August versus November?
Well, we were looking at it in terms of the cost of doing it, as opposed to, I think, doing it later on, like in the general election, is much more expensive, I understood.
It should be less expensive because it's spread, or it should be the same because the state's on the ballot in August and November. So they're paying their proportionate share, so it should be the same cost. I don't think it's a difference in cost.
There's county elections in November.
So
we already became.
They are in August too.
Right.
Right, that's what I mean.
It should be the
So-
same, either whether it's
You're
Talking
August
about
or
very novice elections people here.
Yeah.
Go talk to
So,
Vicky, get the numbers.
It was recommended to us, I actually think Randy is the one who recommended it to us, and I'd have to check on the why. Sorry,
There must
Randy,
be
didn't
something.
throw you under the bus, you're still home recovering, but it was just what, from a timing wise and some of the other asks with schools and some of the competing asks, and that, it was what was recommended to us. We're totally novices at this, and I don't think any of us have actually been through a ballot measure ourselves specifically, other than what I did, some of the stuff I did at the city. So
It went in November in 2004.
Okay.
Well, I guess you always want to have a backup too.
Well,
Like,
now,
if
because we would.
you don't want to wait till the very last ballot in case you need to go back out again or something.
Because we would try again in 2025.
So Randy just raised his hand. Hello, Randy, nice to see you back.
Good morning, Commissioners. You are correct. The cost would be the same no matter which election, whether you went in August or November. I think the thought was with the presidential next year, it may be
There's a lot.
easier to do a November, or excuse me, an August election, but that is totally up to you. You could do either one. The cost would be about the same.
I think you'd have to get something to the elections office by August, early August for November, right? I think it's about,
For November, it needs to be to the elections office by the
August
date
election.
of the primary.
Yeah.
but I see there's gonna be a lot on the ballot in November, so.
Well, honestly, it's the same amount in November or August versus November. All that gets added from August to November is just the presidential. Because, initiatives and in August, you've got the primary, so you've got everybody on the ballot. So it's a long ballot. I mean, that's right. I don't, yeah. Both are gonna be hard, just long ballots. So then with this being towards the end, you get ballot fatigue, all those things. So it's gonna, August or November, I don't see a difference. Pat?
Yeah, I just wanted to counsel that no matter the, the actual election this goes in, there may be considerations about turnout. A lot has changed in 20 years. The electorate here has certainly changed since 2004. Even within these boundaries, there's different voting behaviors. There's also different concern and interest in the issue of taxes. And we might be able to look with Jeff's help at some of the recent tax measures and how they've fared in some of these different areas, just to do some analysis, or talk to MRSC about that, what they're seeing. I just want to piggyback on something Commissioner, I think, Waldrop addressed, which is no matter the boundaries that this goes in, whether it includes the West Plains or the city of Spokane or the Valley, where it stays kind of where it is now, our residents are going to need reassurance and detail, a plan. I think we've heard that vernacular more now than ever in order to feel like they're getting their money's worth. Remember that the ballot language or the ballot title, which is, I think, written out of the prosecutor's office or with their assistants, it actually lacks a lot of specifics for residents, and a lot of folks don't go look for that information proactively. In my experience, as using some recent experience as a guide, and so even though the dollar amount here may feel in kind of not as significant, or that the total revenues coming in aren't as significant, I do still think there's going to be a need for a robust or comprehensive informational effort on the part of this kind of taxing district. And coming from the staff level, I'll just say our staff here, the team of the communications office, is ready to help.
And I think knowing if the city of Spokane is in or out is really important to choosing the date and the need for the types of education and outreach. So I mean, hopefully we'll be able to know. I know we have a new mayor and new council members coming in, but it's a lot they'll be drinking from a fire hose, but this is hopefully we can hear back about their interest and get their questions answered, because that would be really critical to all of the timing, I think.
So we've been in close communication with Marlene. She definitely briefed the new mayor in the transition period, but like you said, total fire hose. They thought over the next month roughly, they'd actually start to have some conversations. We've offered to come do, whether it's a council committee briefing or a study session, whatever they would like, assuming the administration is favorable to even having us bring it forward to them. So that was the first step. We're hoping to hear from them soon. Marlene understands the timing of it and helping to push it forward. But if we don't have a compelling reason to hit August, a little extra time in November, I don't know if there's I'm just waxing out here again, not knowing too much about elections, but if just dry summer is a good time to be asking people to think about their aquifer, is there's a strategic point in that we're having a real rough time come August. That might get people thinking about it.
Yeah, and one of the differences between August and November there'll be less people voting in August versus November, because there'll be people who are just getting a ballot in November to vote for the president. So, I mean, we've seen that historically. So I think there's just a lot of discussions as to, making sure we're all clear as to which ballot we think it's going to be best on. So I think we can have those further discussions outside of here and come back and make a decision as to which ballot here soon to put it on, and then it's going to be the discussion as is the West Plains part of it, or in its own area, which I would prefer its own area, but that's my preference.
So if the city decides it's not going to participate in the renewal, we would still go out though, wouldn't we? Or would we?
We would recommend that.
Yeah, okay. All
I
right.
just meant like considerations if you want to look at voter turnout and numbers in August versus November. But yes, I would still want to go out.
Yeah.
And just, I'll tee one other, just since there's so many little pieces of this, our recommendation is to keep the ask consistent. It funds the program that we have here, and it returns a very reasonable amount back to the other municipalities to further their own programs and make some water quality improvements on their end. There was discussion recently, when we had our WPAB meeting, that a city council member who's no longer on the Center Valley City Council wanted to increase the fee, which is certainly for consideration of the commissioners here. I don't know if we would get the same request from the city of Spokane. They said, yes, we're in, but we want you to double it. I just want you to know that ultimately you all set that fee and what that looks like, but that could come forward and that one of our partners may make that request.
You raised an interesting question. Could we have a variable fee? Or is it flat through the entire area?
I think we'd have to do a little bit of research on that.
Okay.
Just as we can set stormwater fees, to specific areas, it doesn't say you can't.
Okay.
Residential.
And that's a whole, when we think about the West Plains, I think we need to come backwards into that fee, not start with what will $15 do. Let's talk about what do we need to do? And then back ourselves into what the fee should be for the West Plains, because it's different need, different aquifer, different population, as opposed to something that's pretty established. And frankly, we don't need to raise the fee to keep the program going, and still, allow the municipalities to get a healthy chunk back to further their water quality efforts.
Okay, so when do we have this conversation again?
Why don't we not go too long, but we need, the city is a pivotal part of this. So I think what we need to do is really upgrade or ramp up our engagement with the partners of the Valley and Liberty Lake. Make sure they're engaged, whether it is August or November.
Because they might be thinking about their own measures or.
Exactly.
Right.
And in that, we will be working on two major components of that. There's the administrative component, which is making sure that they have resolutions ready, that our interlocal agreements have gone through everybody's legal departments. That always takes time, making sure that's moving forward. We'll do the same with the city, whether they're in or not, as far as making sure they're ready to go with a resolution and an agreement. And then get back in front of you as soon as we have anything important to share. We could just do a briefing if we get a concrete response from the city of Spokane Valley that says, we're in, we're ready for a resolution, tell us which ballot it's gonna be on. And we can kind of keep you updated throughout. And then obviously working very closely with Pat's office on getting this educational component out and getting you all briefed with the talking points that we think are.
But I'd like to be able to sit down with you sooner than later, and let's create a strategy for reaching out to the cities on the West Plains as well as the other stakeholders on the West Plains and stuff, so that we can, at least get that conversation formalized. And I'm getting up to speed with the conversations I've had with different people out there. Okay, thank you.
That's good.
Yeah, I think we've got to, decide which ballot is going to go on first and foremost. So I think that's, I'm happy to have some conversations with the elections office. That's part of understanding and talk to Pat and Jeff on that, because that's kind of first and foremost. And then, because I think we all want to go forward with at least what we have now, whether it's with the city or without the city. So we've got to, I think that's the first head nod, is really making that decision that we're all in favor of continuing what we're doing. And then if the city comes along, the city comes along.
Right, that's our strategy right now, is we're moving forward with the right path.
So the main decision is really which ballot, because that determines timing of things. Because I can see August from the fact that it's gonna be not as big a numbers for people that are gonna not vote at all on it. And it just, that's what I've got to wrap my head around, is talk to Mike McLaughlin. He's pretty in tune to how all that works.
And from a staff perspective, as we figure this out, we will act as if, because we might as well work towards the nearest deadline that we would have. If we get more time, great, but we will act as if we have to be ready to rock by May.
Right.
Unless given other guidance.
Yeah, and then I think is the city gonna come along? Are we gonna add the West Plains or have the West Plains be its own? Is that gonna be able to happen this year, or is that a next year issue? I think that's.
We'll keep marching along with Commissioner French and get some meetings going and start developing a game plan.
Yeah, and then I think it is having that, again, as Pat said, in just a second, Pat, I'll get to you, is that education plan, no matter what, for our, what we're currently doing. What do we spend the dollars on? We're gonna have to have that information, which we have a lot of it, so. So anyway, that's at least a couple of things that I just wanna be clear that I think we all wanna move forward, whether the city's in or out, we've gotta move forward with where we think it needs to be on the ballot. Pat?
Yeah, just to piggyback on something that Commissioner French said about the outreach to the communities that may be included or may not be included. And I know Commissioner Waldrop raised the same point. I'm just stating the obvious, but a lot of times people will want to know how this came to be, how the APA came to be, how the tax came to be. It's all part of the why should I pay this and what am I getting for it? And so the more that we're able to emphasize the community-led part of this conversation, I think the more successful it will be. And the more we're able to point to those consultations and say that other city leaders are on board, or, not just the passage of resolutions during kind of regular business, but that there's some daylight on those conversations and some confidence that people have and some assurances that the city leaders are on board because they were involved in the planning, how the resources are going to be used. All of that, I think, is helpful. So as you go about those efforts, add that communication lens, being able to talk about those consultations and how they went and that engagement.
And we briefly touched on that communications tool that some of us have been made aware of. One of them out there is called Thought Exchange. This SPS has used it a number of times. One component to that is that APA funds are not an eligible use of that.
Right.
So we would have to fund that in another way.
So, and I think when you come back, you said you had additional information on the long-term, seeing what the numbers are from.
On the water quality side.
Quality
yeah.
side stuff. I mean, I think, those are all gonna be things that will help, so when you come back, maybe that would be
We'll have
a great
metrics on our education program too.
discussion. Great.
Yeah, very clear, and Pat can help with this, but what were the wins for the last 20 years? What did we do to protect our water? How many students were educated in all of these different school districts, right? But what did we do around the septic removal? Everything that was accomplished, very clear
Yeah.
accomplishments. And then, of course, what's next for the next 20 years? But Pat can help take it and make it,
Sure.
very easily understandable, I think, by the community. But that's the number one. We can start working on that now. We know what the wins were.
We've got Martha Lou here too, so she's able to help.
Take
with
all
that.
those scientific things
Part-
and
part
make
of
it
the team.
easy to understand.
And then I'll be in touch with Victoria.
Okay.
And on a separate track, we'll start.
Because I think
our
it's
shoulder
really
to that.
important
Yeah.
for residents to weigh in on the West Plains about whether they would participate more in supporting the Spokane. I'm thinking of those who are getting water from the city, or preserving their aquifer and cleaning up the aquifer on the West. I mean, we should talk to voters out there about what they would want to spend the money on and what they would prefer to focus on.
And just one other, thinking about the West Plains, the other eligible use for the city of Spokane is the water infrastructure.
Yeah.
Is there a way?
Water infrastructure. So if that becomes a
Put it
component
into
of
like
it.
stormwater actual
Well,
infrastructure.
not just stormwater, but it could be pipes and booster stations that provide clean drinking water out to the West Plains. That is a eligible use. So however they chose to think about it with their resources, but that is something that could be a piece of this.
Well, and one last thing that came to mind with Pat's point about the history of how business leaders, housing leaders, local government leaders came together around the original, 40-year ago protection area, making sure we communicate very early on with the Valley Chamber and GSI and, getting them up to speed on the history so that they can be advocates for it, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll have to put together kind of the same plan that we did for Measure One as to the different groups to go speak to, so.
We will be talking a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate the feedback and insight. One of our big projects for the year.
Yeah, now, are we good?
We thought we had
So
one
are
project.
there any
we
other
had two big
miscellaneous items?
projects. And you're building a new building.
That's the
Three
easiest one.
projects.
Executive session, we've got time for it, or did you want to do it tomorrow, or?
Commissioner Jordan is not on
He had
at
to
this
jump
point. He had to take off for a moment.
Okay.
So we won't until,
We can do it tomorrow then.
okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Oh, wait.
Just one miscellaneous item for you. On the 14th of December, I had held a town hall to present a funding strategy for Latah Valley and all of the capital infrastructure needs that have to happen in that to be able to spur housing and particularly housing, but also safety. I'd say probably about 85% of the people attended the town hall, very positive about it. And so have worked with Billig, Senator Billig, and also Representative Volz, got language to them. Because two things that came out of this is one, the current lift and TIF legislation does not speak specifically to a fire station. So talking to Senator Billig, he said, well, let's not limit it to a fire station, let's say public safety. So it could be a police station, it could be a fire station, whatever. So I've got language amended for them to do that. And then the representative for WashDOT said, well, we would like to be able to participate in a TIF for state-owned infrastructure. So they could use state dollars, sales tax or real estate dollars, to fund state projects like 195 and the connection of 195 to I-90. And so it wouldn't be local dollars, it'd be state dollars. And so I carried that to Senator Billig and Volz, and they said, God, that's a great idea because we don't have any more money for transportation. So sent that language to them as well. So that I'll be monitoring that as it goes through to try and get those two. I mean, it's just a simple amendment to existing legislation, and as indicated, or as we discussed with Senator Billig, there will probably be some energy around modifying TIF and LIFT in this session. And he said this would be great language to be able to address some of the concerns that are being raised, particularly from fire districts. So just wanted to give you a heads up that, I did since the middle of December, that's what I've been involved in to try and move that agenda forward. I've reached out to the city to say, hey, I'd love to be able to do a presentation to the city council. I met specifically with Betsy Wilkerson and Garrett Jones on the 15th, and they said, oh, yeah, not a problem. And I sit here waiting for the phone to ring. So we'll continue to push for that. But in the meantime, there's no other funding strategy to fix the desperately needed lack of infrastructure in that corridor.
Can you send us the?
Yeah, it's all online.
It's on the website.
Yeah, it's all on the website, county website. It's been there since, what, the middle of December? Yeah. I mean, we can send it to you.
We're on the county website.
Right, under his website,
Under my,
district site.
under me.
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
send it.
Okay.
But we can send it to you directly if you'd
Or
like.
just send a link to it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you want, I can even do a presentation on it, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's what we did in Liberty Lake, it's what we did in, the West Plains. But the funding for it would actually come from the city.
Commissioner Waldron.
On the same topic of our legislative agenda, I did check in with Mike Burgess last week because I wanted to know which appointments my office should be setting up when we go over next week. And we got in the conversation of, so two little updates. There has been a bill dropped around the land swap. And so, but I believe in Mike's conversation with Scott Chesney, there may be some cleanup needed on the language, so just FYI, there is Senator Short and another, I think it's a bipartisan bill, someone from the west side, but we may need to intervene on some cleanup to make it effective for the land swap change that we want to see. And then the other update was, Mike suggested that we may get support for, the asks around replenishing the individual assistance funds for wildfire victims, or even establishing, the public assistance fund that we're talking about, but having a one-page fact sheet that really says where the money, where are the gaps right now, right, for wildfire, those who are victims of wildfires, where are the gaps and where would the dollars go? Because he said, Senator Billig and others would be probably interested in looking for funds, but would need some more specifics. And so I reached out to Chandra and asked if she could send all of us something to review. And so I think she's gonna try and do that by tomorrow, just so that we can start looking at it this week and have something when we go to Olympia next week that would provide a little more detail to the legislators about, where some of the gaps have been and how they could help fund those gaps. So that was just a couple of updates from conversation with Mike.
Yeah, she reminded me, last week, LRSC met, and as part of that meeting, we also had state senators and legislative representatives come in and talk to us about what to expect in this legislative session. And without exception, both sides of the aisle said it will be the most contentious and polarizing legislative session that you've seen in recent history. And he said that everybody in the House and half the folks in the Senate are going to be on the ballot with the presidential and everything else. And they said, just hang on, because it's going to be a very contentious legislative session. Also said, if you want money, hold your breath, because you ain't going to get it. They're concerned about whether there's enough money, and there'll probably be some proposals for more taxes. So anyway, that's kind of what came to LRSC last week.
Okay, and then I think, Scott, we're gonna wanna make sure that we get Mike Burgess on the agenda for Monday well, I guess, do we have a meeting on Monday?
No, Monday, Tuesday.
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday? We can do that. Okay.
So that way then he's on our agenda to give us an update before we all head over there.
I just had one other quick miscellaneous. So I think it was the day that we had our last meeting, December, what was our last meeting, the 12th? 11th, 12th. I got an email from, and I've spoken with the Jack Garrity passed away, and he was, former county commissioner, former mayor, and the family was hoping that, we make a statement or just recognize that he was a former commissioner and recognize his passing. I think the city, the mayor, Mayor Woodward sent a letter, and I think they put the flag at half-mast or something, back when they were doing the funeral. But we haven't met since then, and so I just wanted to flag, do we wanna make a statement or just put out something saying condolences to the family or a letter from the chair or something, just to recognize, since they requested it.
So I think Commissioner Jordan sent me an email about it, and as far as I know, we have never done that at the county. Because again, we're a body that makes decisions.
Rather than the mayor,
is
right.
the individual. And it was the mayor that did the proclamation, not the council. So
Yeah, I don't know if a proclamation is needed, but a statement to the media or anything just saying, you know,
I think I guess I would feel we're kind of past that point. And again, we've got lots of county commissioners that have passed away. I don't know, and
I think a statement to the media, I think we missed the boat. I mean, I
Yeah,
think it'd be a little late. I think most of the
they asked
media,
us like the week we were all leaving on.
I think most of the media would be like, okay, thanks, commissioners, you're a month late.
Well, I was just trying to come up with
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
since we unfortunately finished our last meeting right after that, right that same day.
I just think it's tough because again, as commissioners, we're doing things as a body, we're not doing things as individuals. And so, that's just my perspective, because then otherwise you're doing it for every commissioner that passes away. And
So
I
if
think that
that-
was a unique
yeah.
situation for the city to do it because he was the mayor and he was the leader, specifically there. So that's where I just see it differently. I mean, certainly my condolences are to the family, but that's.
So maybe in the future, that's just an individual commissioner choice if they wanna make a statement or a comment or something like that.
That's the way we've handled it in the past. We haven't done anything. I can't remember doing a proclamation for somebody passing for as long as I've been here.
Yeah, or putting the flag at half-staff for
Yeah.
that either.
Yeah.
You know, again, because we're here collectively as a body making decisions, not as individuals making decisions. Such the mayor's is a unique position, or if we were a charter county and it was a county executive, that would be a different situation because that's a different elected making individual decisions versus the body making decisions. So that's, I guess, my perspective on it.
Just wanted to make a mention, because
Yeah.
it came in during the holiday time and
No, and
wasn't
Chris
able to,
reached out to me then, and I told him, let him know and email the same thing that I have not known us to do that for any county commissioners, at least. Or
County commissioner, or for that matter, any other elected. I mean, even when McCaslin passed away, a state senator, I don't think we did anything then either and stuff. And then the only time we fly the flag at half-mast is when we're directed either by the state or the feds.
yeah, by the governor or the president. So anyway, and it's, no reflection on any political parties or any of that. I think that's part of, it's just that's what we've done at the county. And I think at least what I would want to continue to do, because I think otherwise then we're going to get into if someone passes away, all these things. And again, I think we're making decisions collectively as a body, not individually, so. Any other miscellaneous? Pat, you've got a mask on now.
Yeah.
Now I don't see you, so there we go. Okay, anything else? Otherwise, we'll see everybody tomorrow at 9.